Hello and welcome to another episode of Conversations with Purple. I'm your host, Purple. Thank you very much for tuning in. So this week I thought I would take a look back at a movie that was released September 23rd, 1983. Now, this movie has a tie-in this week with my radio show, and the movie Eddie and the Cruisers. Hard to believe it's been 37 years since that movie was released. Boy, does time fly. So the movie centers around the investigation of the mysterious disappearance of the band's frontman, Eddie Wilson. And the actual movie band only had two professional musicians in them. One was John Cafferty and the Beaver Brown Band's saxophone player, Mark Antunes. Director Martin Davidson based the movie on a novel by P.F. Klug and said he wanted the band to have this New Jersey Bruce Springsteen and the E Street sound mixed in with a little bit of The Doors and some Dion. Yeah, that is quite a combination. Kenny Vance of the band Jay and the Americans, well, he was hired then as a consultant to add some authenticity to the film. So then Kenny Vance told Martin Davidson he found the band that fit the bill perfectly to the sound he was looking for. And who is that band? Well, it was John Cafferty and the Beaver Brown Band, a little unknown band out of Rhode Island. Now, the film was a box office flop. It only grossed $1.4 million on its opening weekend on September 23rd, 1983. The film's total gross in North America was only $4.7 million. Yeah, it didn't do too well. So it was then pulled from the theaters after only 3 weeks. However, the movie then got a second life, and in 1984 it started being played on HBO on a very frequent basis. In fact, that's when I first caught the film, and then it got a cult following. Now, this prompted the studio to re-release the soundtrack, and then it became a chart success. It ended up going quadruple platinum. That is quite the accomplishment. 9 months after the film's initial theatrical release, On the Dark Side was the #1 song on Billboard's mainstream rock charts, and it was a #7 on the Billboard Hot 100. The second single, Tender Years, that one reached #31 on the Billboard Hot 100. Based upon the cult success of the film, they then decided to release a sequel in 1989. However, once again, it was just a theatrical failure. The soundtrack, in fact, was not even released until 1992, and yes, once again, it featured John Cafferty and the Beaver Brown Band. After the release of the Eddie and the Cruisers soundtrack, John Cafferty and the Beaver Brown Band had a couple of releases, including the follow-up soundtrack to the second Eddie and the Cruisers movie, and they did have a couple of songs featured on other soundtracks, including Something About Mary. However, they did not reach the success they had with the Eddie and the Cruisers soundtrack. In fact, they only had 4 albums out altogether, and they just never repeated that success. And I'm really not quite sure why that was, because I really thought they were a great band. Maybe it was they were too similar to Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band. That is some people's opinion. I'm not really quite sure. I also think that there was a lot of confusion at the time when Eddie and the Cruisers was released, because a lot of people thought they were a real band, and a lot of people didn't realize that there was an actual band. Yes, John Cafferty and the Beaver Brown Band, but they didn't seem to realize that they were two separate things. And I think that in a way hurt John Cafferty and the Beaver Brown Band, because I think people didn't differentiate between what they saw on the film and what was in the soundtrack. So I think that did hurt their career, which is sad, because they really are a great band. And they actually are still together today, and they still do perform live. Why they haven't released some new music, that I'm not quite sure of. So that is a look back on Eddie and the Cruisers. And I think that was a great film, despite it flopping at the box office. It is actually one of my favorite movies, and yes, like I said, I caught it on HBO back in 1984, and I think it really was a great rock and roll movie. So if you haven't seen it, I suggest you check it out. That is this week's flashback and highlight feature for the week, and I will be playing On the Dark Side on my radio show this week. Flashback 80s with Purple, so be sure to tune in. Once again, thanks for listening to Conversations with Purple, and be sure to check out my website, Conversations with Purple, which has links to not only my podcast but also to my radio show. Thank you for listening. Have a great week, and I'll catch you on the flip side.
The preceding program was a Purple Power production. All rights reserved.